So this morning, instead of having like 6 speakers, 10 minutes each, we're going to just do rapid fire presentations, and then all 6 speakers will be up here and answering questions. And the theme of this morning's talk will be about developer kind of ecosystem / developer tools, and a little bit of a different perspective from each one of us this morning.
Full now. My progress bar is full.
Is there? Did you have slides, Dan?
No, do you want me to go first?
All right, Dan's going first. No slides. So please just write down your questions, and then we're just going to rapid fire presentations, and at the end we'll just answer questions all in the front.
Morning, everybody. I'll try and keep it high energy and moving quickly, and yeah, we'll do questions at the end. So my name is Dan Driscoll. I'm a developer at Microsoft Research. We publish the bot framework. I could tell you about what the bot framework is, but you have web browsers. You can just go to the website and you can see it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the services that we include in there and why, and I think the why is the more important piece, why you'd want to put these services in a bot. So to start out with, let's think about some of the bots that we're familiar with, right? We know of like chatty bots that seem like they have a whole lot of magic in them, and we can almost like put those into one category. And then you can also think about really simple bots, bots that accomplish one task, like a meme bot or something that's, you know, really like it only has 2 or 3 slash commands built into it. And you could think of these sort of non-intelligent bots at the other end. And I think this spectrum, where we have simple bots on one end and intelligent bots on the other end, is a bit of a myth. That this spectrum, even though it may exist, is not actually all that important. And I don't want you to think about bots as being simple or intelligent. The reason why I think this, think about the interactions that you have with people day to day, and think about you know, you have deep emotional connections with your friends and colleagues, where you share a lot of context with them, and you have like sometimes they will have authority to act on your behalf. You may also have transactional interactions with people who you only interact with for 30 seconds or more, right? Folks like you know, when you're buying a coffee, or wait staff at a restaurant, you have transactional interactions and you have more emotional interactions, but in both cases these are intelligent interactions, and I think bots can be the same way. If you imagine what people were like if they were like the bots that we have right now, you would go to you know, a coffee shop, and if it was your first time in a particular coffee shop and you had a question about something on the menu, they would say, "I'm sorry, I can't help you." Or if you were riding transit in a city that you've never been to before, and you know, got on the bus and had a question, the bus driver would be able to, you know, let you on the bus, but if you had a question, they wouldn't be able to help you out. So I think intelligence is something we should put in all bots. And that intelligence isn't like this magic AI, you know, magic chatbot stuff. It's individual things to solve, it's individual features to solve individual problems. And the Microsoft Bot Framework has a lot of tools to do this. We have cognitive intelligence tools, so that if your user types something in a way that you didn't expect, we can correctly classify that. If you have like hashtags that come in and you need to break those apart, we have tools for that. It's not this magic AI sprinkle that you put all over everything. It's individual purpose-built tools. and Ben's Gmail. So I think that was kind of my rapid-fire high-level pitch for, I think, why you should think about putting AI in every single bot that's out there, not just the ones that are full-up artificial intelligence, that all bots should be intelligent. And I think that our tools are great, but honestly, like the ones from IBM are fantastic, the ones from BOTKIT are fantastic. Look at them and find the ones that work for you. And if there are some of ours from the Microsoft Bot Framework and the cognitive services teams, let me know, and I want to make them better. So I think that's it for me. Are you ready to go now? Not yet. We're going to hold questions until all 6 are done. Great.
Thank you, Dan. I think I just want to echo what Dan just said. Like no one of the tools that you will probably see today, or any of the things that we've built, is like the comprehensive solution. This is going to be something that you have to compose your own solution for. So definitely like try all these different things, different approaches. So I'm going to just talk really quick about BOTKIT, the thing that I built and is powering some of the more successful bots out there right now. I'm Ben Brown. I run Howdy.ai. It's a Slack bot and bot building tool. This is a quote that I made up. Making bots should be fun and easy and not too technical. I think that's an important thing. Like the people who build bots are not all going to be hardcore software engineers or AI people. They're coming from web development or mobile app development and things like that. So, and I think we have an opportunity to sort of improve the way these things are made. So that's why we built BOTKIT. I just want lots of bots out there. I want bots to be ubiquitous. So BOTKIT, really what we focus on with BOTKIT is like, can you get your bot up online on Slack or on Facebook or on Twilio or Kik and things like that very, very quickly, so you're talking to your like magical robot friend. Like that's the coolest thing that you can do. And I think we're fairly successful. We get tweets like this all the time, like this guy just started coding, and he's like 2 months in using BOTKIT, building bots. People are like saying like, oh, I have so much fun doing this stuff. Like it's a JavaScript framework. These people are that they're talking about. They're having fun. And then there's like tons and tons of stuff out on Medium and all over the place that are like example apps in BOTKIT and like how to do BOTKIT stuff. So there's a lot of resources out there already for BOTKIT. So you can build bots right now for Slack, Facebook, and Twilio IP messaging. Here's the details. So you can just npm install BOTKIT. You can clone it from GitHub. There's a ton of example code in the repo that will like literally you just get a token from Slack, run this app, it's online. Same thing for Facebook and Twilio. So this is how we basically boil it down, right? Bots do basically three things. They hear triggers. That could be like a pattern, or it could be an event, or it could be a file being uploaded. They reply to messages, so simple replies like I say hi, the bot says hi, and then they conduct conversations. Multiple messages, questions and answers going back and forth. To do that, it seems fairly simple, but like to do that, you have to do all of these things before your bot comes online, right? And each platform is very slightly different and kind of a pain in many ways to get these things started. For example, Twilio has like 5 different API tokens that you need to get before you can, get your thing online. You have to configure all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. So BOTKIT takes care of all of that stuff. It provides the web server, it provides the webhook endpoint, it does the OAuth, it does the dealings with the APIs, it provides tools for pattern matching, it has plugins to tie into Wit.ai and Lewis and API.ai for natural language. It does all of that stuff and sort of moves it into the background so the developer can focus on building a user experience and building the application that they want to build. So this is like a Hello World BOTKIT app. And this is like the most verbose setting because this is Twilio with its 5 keys. So like that's all of the code. You run this app, it's online, it's talking to Twilio and sending and receiving messages. It's just a Hello World thing here, but you can see that it's fairly straightforward. So I'm just going to dive into a couple of these little things. So bots, like I said, bots hear things. So in BOTKIT, we have a hears function, and you pass in the thing that it hears, and that can be a set of patterns. It can be intents that you want to match. It can be any matter of things. And then there's the second parameter there is like what type of message that is. So message received is basically any message. You can also have like in Slack, you could have a direct message. You could have a mention like @bot so-and-so. You can have things like ambient messages, which are messages that are not directly to the bot. And that's it. So you build your hears pattern, and now the bot is going to respond to those things. You see none of the other messages that don't match these patterns. You don't have to deal with them, which is particularly important in Slack, where you receive a fire hose of messages. So there you can see reply. So the bot replies to that message, right? So somebody said something, and the bot says got it in this example. Very, very simple. Here's an example of this conversation. So a message comes in, the same thing, right? Somebody said something, and we're going to start a conversation, say, oh, hello, what is your name? And there's an ask function. So what does that do? It like sends the message and then waits for the person to respond. And instead of having to deal with that response and connect it yourself to the question that you asked, Many of the same people who organized this are involved in our event called Talk About It. It's a 2-day series of talks from bot makers and people who are enthusiastic about bots, and a day of workshops where we're going to get really, really technical about this stuff. We have some super awesome speakers, including the founders of ActiveBuddy, which was a bot from the early aughts, one of whom is going to be here today. People from Purple, people from Polstring, Darius Kazemi, who's a Twitter bot maker, and about 15 other people. And we'd love to, if you guys want to talk to me. We have a submission form on our website, talkabout.ai. That's it.
Good morning. Good morning. Let me just start at the top. So my name is Rob. I work on SuperScript. I work at Slack and on SuperScript. This is a passion project since about 2013. So there's a lot of people writing bots, and this is just another way of doing it. So Howdy is another great platform, and this is very similar in a lot of respects. And I'll just kind of walk through some of the basic stuff, and then we'll call it a day. Get back to writing bots. So SuperScript is a multi-platform dialogue management creating tool for building conversational interfaces. And I built it because writing natural language is hard. So this is like a common trigger. And a lot of systems under the hood, what they'll do is they'll take your input and then they'll basically build a regular expression, or you have to supply a regular expression. But building regular expressions is not easy. So in this case, the word natural is optional. There's also the star, so it means anything before this is fine. We want to see language is in either hard or tough. So to write the regular expression, you've got to kind of do something like this. So in this case, there's word boundary detection, there's optionals. You've got to deal with, maybe there's more input at the end, maybe that's required, maybe it's not. All of these blocks are actually non-capturing with the exception of the last one. So I want to get tough or hard back and know what that is. So maybe I could put that into my reply later on down the road. There's also so much more to just building a bot. You need to be able to normalize your input, and SuperScript does that. So there's over 1,700 different words that we convert from Commonwealth English to US English. We also fix all of the concatenation. There's thousands and thousands of common typos. We take care of all of that even before the input comes in. And even after the input comes in, we end up doing some parsing on it. So if anyone's familiar with natural language processing, there's stemming, and you can either just put like a Porter stemmer or a Lancaster stemmer on the input to remove the inflections. But that's actually pretty aggressive because you end up with words that aren't actually words. So we go one step up and lematize the entire input. So it basically brings it back to something that's actually usable, and you end up getting better matches. So here's an example of a conversation. So this is essentially, the first line is, if I see anything, I want to reply. So the minus is a keyword that means just reply with this. What is your favorite color? And then on the next line, there's like any input that comes in, any one word that comes in, and if the last thing said was what is your favorite color, I'm going to reply with the actual color captured from here, and say, is my favorite color too. So, I mean, this is a very simple example of just like writing, actually using something that someone's familiar with, writing a natural language, and then it actually works. And it'll handle, like I said, all of the inflections, all of the other hard stuff is kind of taken care of. Moving on. Sorry. Oh, natural scroll. The system is very extensible, so we have a concept of plugin, and there's a very rich plugin architecture. Because we're using Node.js, everything is asynchronous. So in this case, I'm actually calling out to a function that looks up the weather, and it takes what assuming is the city, passing it into this function to look up the weather, and then you've got essentially a node or a JavaScript file somewhere else in your system that will process, and it'll call essentially anything in node land, so any sort of NPM module is available to you. And again, it's asynchronous, so you can go out and get the weather. You can do a database lookup. What's kind of cool is inside these functions, the this operator, so the actual object itself, the scope, you have a user object. So the user that said this, you have a very rich set of information about who they are, what the last thing they said was, the last 15 things they've said, the last things that they matched There's topics as well, where they've navigated to and from, as well as the message itself. So the message that we get in here is not necessarily just a string. It's actually a very rich object with, we do parts of speech tagging on it. We do so light parsing. We have multiple different forms, and we'll pull out some entities like the names, the nouns, the verbs, all that good stuff. And then we call out to the service and then reply back. And at the end of the day, there's also state. So you can get into some really complicated things. For example, if you want to be able to save a user's name, it's as simple as just calling a function out to do that, and it stores it for later on. And then as well, you can get and recall these things. As well, there's a Drupal store built in. So if you want to do more complicated, not just key value, but subject, verb, object, graph style, knowledge extraction and knowledge fulfillment, you can do that as well, and that's kind of all built in using Level Graph, which is part of the one of Google's tools. Basically, anything you want to do, you can probably do it with SuperScript. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, buddy. All right, I've got a really slick, super polished presentation here in the form of a markdown file.
Markdown presentation.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the serverless Slack bot. People have been talking about the serverless thing for a little while, and I think it's interesting. So we've seen these big shifts. Can you guys see this at all? No, I didn't think so. Is that better? One more. I'm losing my eyesight too. It's cool. Ben, your computer's weird. Is that good? Okay. So we've seen these things happen, and we'd like to think that messaging is going to be a thing. I hope it's a thing. I'm betting on it. And we're seeing all these different terms, but what we're talking about is bots. And bots effectively are this ephemeral agent that acts on your behalf. It doesn't have to be this long-form conversational thing. And part of the reason this is interesting is because we're getting these platforms. And all these platforms share an interesting characteristic in that they're effectively webhooks. Slack, HipChat, Messenger, Telegram, Kik, whatever. So it's kind of like a pendulum. In the 90s, we were really stoked on servers because of the web. In the early 2000s, we were stoked on clients because JavaScript became possibly acceptable to use on the client with Google Maps. Mid-2000s, APIs became a big deal, and we swung back to the server. Around 2007, mobile became a big deal, and we got back on the client. And now we're writing servers again. Bots are just freaky web servers, which is kind of interesting. So simultaneously, the smallest unit of compute has become a function. And this is really significant. The metaphor that we've used in the cloud up to this point has been a server, which kind of makes no sense. When we're scaling, we end up having a whole bunch of these things behind a load balancer, and it's a pain to scale. So the cloud came along, and with the cloud, we've got these ideas of Lambda functions, and it's accelerating. If you look at this thing on the side, we're getting more and more of these things as time goes on. Functions are cheap. You get about 1 million requests per month for free. So let that sink in. It's free to do computing now. It's kind of a big deal. I totally don't understand Microsoft's pricing, by the way. I have to talk to someone about that. So I'm working on a thing called Begin. We chose Lambda. We didn't choose it because we think it's better. We chose it because it was easy and accessible. I think you would be fine to choose any of these solutions if you're interested in them, so I recommend you actually try them all. People think that the exciting thing is that compute just got free. The exciting thing to me is that not so much that it's free to do this, because there's always a business case to build a server. The exciting thing to me is that my deployment time is now in seconds. So let that one sink in. So right now, if I want to deploy a new bot instance, it takes me roughly 3 to 5 seconds. That's a huge accelerant to market. That's unheard of up to this point. This is a competitive advantage for your team, and this means that bots actually have an advantage over traditional delivery vehicles for software. So yeah, that's really all I had to talk about. Bots are freaky web servers, except for you don't need to run a server anymore. Thanks.
Hi everybody, Ivar from Kik. So I'm going to start off not with the slides, oops, my bad, and just talk a little bit about kind of our history with bots. So we started with a promoted chats system about 3 years ago. And the take on that was WeChat had these official accounts. So we're like, oh, brands want a presence on messaging. So we created this presence where a brand would go to a website, put in some strings, put in some responses, and we launched it. So we had these really simple bots launched. And there was definitely attraction to the idea, and brands gravitated towards it. So we launched it, got some good exposure, but then usage sucked because it was there was no dialogue. And about 2 years ago, Ted, our CEO, took the initiative and said, well, we got to do something a little more powerful. And we created a bot platform, first used internally, which we launched early April. And the idea there was, Ted wanted to just double down and said that promoted chats as just, broadcast messages to users, it just wasn't going to cut it. And we needed to kind of have innovation happen elsewhere. So that's why he built he started the bot platform initiative. And our approach there has really been, for us particularly, has been entertainment bots, because teenagers are our main audience. And I can't wait for the session in the afternoon. I think the reason why a lot of developers here today and yesterday are asking, like, why is like Microsoft here and Slack and Kik and now Facebook, like, why are they all here? Shouldn't they be like in their trenches and competing against each other? The main reason, I think, is because the reason we're all here, we're all looking for killer experiences, and we don't want to have the environment built with just these broadcasting bots that nobody likes. And so that's the reason I'm here, and that's the reason why I think a lot of you are here. And yeah. All right, so why Kik? There's probably not a lot of you, unless you're 13 to 23 years old, that use Kik. But if you have a nephew or a niece, they probably do use Kik. So some of our aggregate stats are, we're really teenager focused. So 70% of our user base is 13 to 23-year-olds. So if your bot or a bot you're planning to make is within that demographic, please talk to me and my partner Sergio, and we'd be happy to help you out. So what makes teenagers different than the rest of us when they use messaging? The main thing is they're just very chatty. So 65 messages on average per day, and they spend a lot of time on their phones. We ran an internal survey with our users, and 42% of them said they want a direct conversation with their brands. And we're definitely seeing that in our engagement and retention numbers. What's really worked well is when a brand or a movie studio creates a character that users can resonate and feel like they're having a conversation with. So just like all the other positive reasons people have talked about bots this morning, same thing with the Kik ecosystem. So in case anyone hasn't tried deploying a bot in Kik, it's pretty much the same process. Send and receive API. Probably one thing that we have, like Slack has, is we do have a curated bot shop. So what you would do is you would create the bot, test it, and then you would submit it for approval in the bot shop. And for testing, internal testing, there's no approvals. But if you want in the bot shop, it goes through a editorial process and will increase your discoverability by having it approved. These are some of the best practices we've had since building this for about a year internally and a couple months externally. Be authentic, make it easy. So we try to, for the AI bots, which we don't have a lot of, most of our bots, we try to tell our developers as a best practice to show buttons and suggested responses, even though it feels It may sound like it's IVR-like, but it's not, because the experience with kind of talking to a bot and having a pre-populated canned response, it feels conversational in the context of suggested responses. That's it.
Introduce yourself.
I just emailed the presentation. We'll see if it shows up here. So I'm Mike Brevoort. I was founder of BeatBoop, which is a platform for hosting Slack and Messenger bots. We're focused on developers and giving developers the freedom to build the bots as they want. So we launch bots as containers. We auto-scale those containers. We handle like key and token management and continuous integration, continuous delivery. So similar to like a Heroku type experience, or even like the Lambda timeline. You do a git push. We build and rapidly auto-deploy your bot within seconds. So what I'm going to talk about today, well actually, so this is me again, BeatBoop, so Slack and Messenger bots. Some of these slides may look different because I just realized I don't have the fonts on Ben's computer, so we'll see how that turns out. And again, we launch bots as containers, so as developers you can bring whatever framework, whatever language you want, and we'll build and deploy your code. And so, but I want to talk about BeatBoop. I want to talk about something a little bit different, and that we're always challenged with, this idea that bots need to be intelligent. And the expectations that we're held to is these bots need to be really intelligent, and our users get really frustrated when they're not intelligent. And I think, I love this quote from Jan LeCun, who made this comment after the AlphaGo occurrence, where he basically said, if intelligence was a cake, and if unsupervised learning was the cake, and supervised learning was the icing on the cake, and reinforced learning was the cherry, we can't make the cake. Like we can make the icing and the cherry, but we can't even make the cake. Like in reality, and so the expectations that people have, and that even we're putting on ourselves, and what everybody else is saying that should happen with bots, like we can't even make the cake. And so this is really like your AI chatbot that's supposed to be this spaceship, this amazing spaceship, and everybody, when they have a chatbot, they put AI before it, and they're like, my AI chatbot is really like this cart with bicycle wheels that looks like it's been sitting in a yard for 2 years. Maybe it's close to that. And so maybe we're just doing it wrong, like we're thinking about these things in the wrong way. And so I'd like to encourage us to kind of start to think differently about these things. And so Arthur Kessler in the Ghost in the Machine coined this term called a holon, which was this concept of something that was simultaneously a part and a whole, that was autonomous and self-reliant and had a deep degree of independence, but could participate sort of in a network of things, but handle contingencies without higher authority, etc. And so with that in mind, if you take, this is a common use case of, here's this bot, he doesn't even give you the weather, he just gives you the temperature, right? And what's here, you have a user that asks in natural language for the temperature, and the bot responds with the temperature. And what is, oops, oh, my fonts are gone, so you can't see my bold highlighting. But what's significant here is, we do basic intent matching and the extraction to say you're looking for the temperature at this particular time, at this particular place, and the bot responds with some pleasantries, but basically with the temperature. And so if you take a step back and say, well, what if it wasn't a human asking that in natural language from a chat perspective? What if it's just another bot? And we kind of flip the script, right? So we say that our bots need to understand natural language, but we respond in language as well. And so what if the bot asks the question of what the temperature is, and maybe in a more structured way that's actually easier to understand. And so you could conceivably see that you could have some bot, and this one's named that asks for what the temperature is, and the bot responds, and he does, NLU on the response and parses out the temperature. Super simple use case, though. And let's say we want to do something a little bit more involved or interesting, which is just like, I want to ask the bot, just, hey, do something, because I think we focus so much on the conversation when we build bots that we miss the fact that bots can be these great things that are like sight unseen. I think like the best conversation you could have is the one that you don't have to have, and we focus so much on the conversation. I want bots to do things for me that I don't have to talk to unless it's really important or high value. So what if I ask the bot to say, hey, tell me when I should just dress for the weather? Like, watch out for me, be my agent, and do that for me. You got it, Candace. And then sometime later, the bot says, yo, Candace, don't forget your umbrella today. We can say, well, how did know this? And how could we actually build this? And just so, here's a thought experiment. So what if we have this back channel, and we have these multiple bots in the back channel, and one is called Cal, and Cal just chimes in every time Candace has an appointment upcoming for the day, and is like, oh, look, Candace has a meeting, is meeting her brother for lunch in the mission today. And Tempe sees that and sees the location and is like, oh, wait, the temperature in San Francisco around lunchtime is going to be 64 degrees, and we have yet another bot that's in this back channel that sees that and goes, oh, there's an 85% chance of rain today in San Francisco. Something's happening in San Francisco. They're just reacting to what's happening in this channel and responding. And then goes, oh, wait, San Francisco, chance of rain. I better tell Candace that she's going to need her umbrella. And then she messages Candace to say, yo, Candace, bring your umbrella today. Thank you. You're the best, right? And that happened by this sort of brittle composition of things happening in this back channel. And you can see, other things could sort of happen as well. But I like to think about this as kind of this ticker tape, right? And if you remember the old ticker tapes with stock quotes getting printed, and if a channel is like a ticker tape, you could have both bots observing and humans observing, or writing and observing to the ticker tape. So anybody could write to this tape, and it's this history that's happened, right? So bots and people. And so the example I gave was just bots in a channel, but you could think about, well, a human can jump into that channel as well. And it's actually the way that we're building the inner workings of Beep Boop. We don't have any administrative UI, and we're building all of administrative functions as little bots that go and do things. We can integrate, or we can sort of integrate and talk to those bots, especially when we don't have functions that humans do at the moment. We talk to bots and trigger things, and then we figure out what language works and how it works, and we're starting to add bots to do things that we're doing, like generating invoicing at the end of the month. And so, this is maybe what that looks like. It's like Candace just sees and talks to it. One very specific thing does sort of holonic or like monadic of like does one thing and do it one thing well. But behind of this is sort of chaos that's happening and reacting. And then, so if you could let yourself assume that that's possible, then even greater and greater, more complex things can be created out of composition of this style of development. And I go back to Marvin Minsky, who wrote in the Society of Mind, that talks about intelligence, that we're trying to create this. It's not this one thing. It's not like the intelligent AI Siri chatbot that can do everything, answer every question for me under every scenario. It's not any one trick, but it really stems from this vast diversity and not like one single perfect principle. And so back to Kessler with his idea of this holon, that if we think of these bots potentially that share these channels and talk to each other, that you end up forming these like synaptic networks or these holarchies of bots that communicate with each other. Which is like, what the, like, are you kidding me, right? Like, this is either like terrifying or absolutely ridiculous. It's potentially very brittle. It brings all sorts of questions about privacy and like whether they have first-party data, third-party data, etc. Right now, we're experimenting with this, and it's actually been a lot of fun. It's been interesting, very much in a first-party way in our own trusted channel. And in addition, you have to be aware of things like the left pad bot, if any of you is familiar with what happened a few months ago in the Node community there. But anyway, we're sort of on this journey. We're building Beep Boop as a way for people and developers to be able to build and share bots, and we think it's really interesting and what they do. So join us on the journey. We've got kind of a long way to go. So thanks, everybody.
So we're going to answer questions. So just a quick run through. We had me from Microsoft Research and the Bot Framework team. Who was after me? Ben was in here. Yep. Ben Brown from Howdy. Ivar talked about Kick. Mike, you talked about Beep Boop just now. Rob talked about SuperScript from Slack, right? Brian talked about serverless bots, and I forget your name. You're from Gupshup, that's right. Yes. So any questions for all of us or individuals? Second row, or third row, sorry.
Yeah, so for everybody that has a platform where people can go and build bots, so I guess not the but everybody else, everybody gave kind of an example of hi and response hello. I'm just wondering what the most advanced thing, like what's the coolest thing that your platform can do for each person? You know, like the most advanced bot that you can imagine someone could build.
Yes. Does anyone want to jump in? Yeah. Go.
All right. So the most advanced part on the Gupshup platform, so we're working with Sage. Sage is the global accounting software company, kind of like Intuit. So they're launching an income and expense capture, reporting, and so on. Essentially, accounting software, one of the most boring and dull categories. But they want to enable users worldwide capture these things. So there's a NLP interface. Just in the moment, you can say I paid $50 at Starbucks for a client meeting, and it just captures that, inserts it in the record, or received $100,000 for web design, whatever it is, right? So in the moment, you capture all these events, but behind the scenes, it's aggregating into the accounting software. That's one example. But we work in Barclays Bank for support. NBC sort of movie recommendation bots, a recruiting company building a whole sort of recruiting workflow, and so on. Plus lots and thousands of self-serve bots, some of which I may not even be aware of, but they just use the platform to do things. So lots of it, yeah.
Yeah, I guess from our perspective, since we launch bots as containers, and any language, any platform, so it's really like what those frameworks provide and what you can do. And so what we see is, especially on our platform, a lot of people doing like bespoke custom integrations with all sorts, like on Slack, with whatever systems they use. For example, we're helping build a secret shopper app for a particular brand that does has secret shoppers that go into stores, and so they're helping facilitate and coordinate and gather feedback from all those shoppers in Slack, because they use Slack and there's a mobile app for Slack. And so it's it's the same sort of mix, match, burn kind of experience with APIs that you would call like on our platform. It's since we give developers full control to be able to code the bot they want in the language and the framework that they want, that they can do sort of whatever they want, whatever's possible. But most of our people tend to build bots in Node on BOTKIT. We have a lot of other people that build in Python, but it's primarily Node and BOTKIT. So.
The most advanced features, I would say it's less about the features and more about the compelling experiences right now. So in terms of features, a lot of the brainstorming I've heard yesterday, and I think a lot of the platforms are going to head towards the direction, is the group bots. What can bots do within a group? And it makes perfect sense. But I would say at this very moment, some of the most compelling bots we have on Kik are the narrative bots. Bots tell a story. With Kik, you can do combine bots plus interactive HTML5 web pages. So we have this bot called Survival, which has you in a zombie apocalypse situation, and you have to escape that situation by a combination of storytelling and real, quick action type of arcade type of experiences. So it's a combination of a narrative plus fast action game, and I would say it's more compelling than feature-rich.
I think many of you know some of the smart chatbots we've launched on Microsoft's platform. Caption Bot, which captions images. We have bots that swap faces, and you may also be thinking of some of our other chatbots. I won't belabor all that. We do have a lot of bots at various layers of our stack, and you can actually play around with a lot of them on Skype and other the other platforms we support. But
yeah, your guys' stuff has actually more primitive sort of elements than any other platforms, I think. You have integer types and dates and stuff that you can actually expose in conversations for what's worth. So I think the Microsoft one is very fully featured app development thing. I think our thing is a Node application, so you can do basically anything you want. Your application logic lives in between the messages being sent, right? So there's not really a limit. You can have very, very complex complex conversations with just a couple of tiers deep of callbacks in ours. But like I would point at like KIP is running on BOTKIT. StatsBot is running on BOTKIT. Howdy is running on BOTKIT. These are things that operate in many channels and coordinate activity across direct messages and public channels and aggregate the information and send it out to APIs and send them to internal services and all that stuff. So I don't think there's any like hard limit on what any of these things can do.
Question to Dan of Microsoft. There is a slot filler in LeRoux. What's the algorithm? Is it traditional NLP regex or is it deep learning RNN?
Great question. I don't know. I can certainly hook you up with the LeRoux folks. And we do have slot filling at two different levels. So we have slot filling at the natural language level, and we also have a form filling system where if you define your data types, we have a conversation engine that walks over that and puts fields in essentially your raw data types. But I'll connect you with LeRoux. I actually don't know which one.
So I have a question for, is it Rob? Right, so about the SuperScript thing. When the demo app where it was just, or sort of like a hello world, what is my favorite color? What is your favorite color?
Sure.
So if the user responds with blue but sometimes red, or my favorite color is green most of the time, then you end up with a response that looks very Eliza-like, right? So
Absolutely, yep.
I'm curious about, do you parse responses to be able to get at the semantic underneath?
So the question is, do we parse units semantically under the hood? And the answer is not in the traditional sense. So there's no deep or shallow semantic parsing happening, or any like parse trees that are being constructed. That particular example is fairly contrived, but in that case, I was just looking for one word after. So is expecting one color unit. But you could essentially put in some sort of entity extraction that would understand a list or a host of colors, and then pull that unit out, very specifically if you wanted to. Or you could plug in a parser.
This is for Gupshup and maybe Microsoft. How are you guys handling, I noticed you did a demo when you actually put on Facebook to respond with like hi and like the Facebook ID. So how are you handling pushing these different platforms, like the minor differences between them?
So in our case, on the Gupshup platform, what we've done is, we try to do the combination of sort of cross-platform as well as native, if that's the word, okay? Because different messages render differently, right? So you can have structured messages in Facebook, the templates, the carousel. Slack is talking about structured messages. Telegram and Kik have custom keyboards and so on. So our goal is to have a single common API that still renders differently or natively in each of the messaging platforms, right? So wherever possible, you can still normalize the API without normalizing the actual rendering. In our case, yeah.
We take kind of a very similar approach in the bot framework. We've taken the concepts that seem to apply kind of generically and uniformly across all of the platforms. Everyone has a concept of a message, and we model those in ways that seem to be conventional across all those platforms. And then in cases where certain platforms have extra functionality, we have a hook through. Our approach to this has been that if we build a platform that hides features in Facebook and Slack and Kik and others, that you're not going to write to our API, you're just going to write directly to those. And so we have pass-throughs for all those mechanisms, and then we also conventionalize the stuff that everyone seems to agree on.
If you look at the universe of bots that are being created today and say about 90 days, what do you think the split will be between bots versus like native domesticated applications versus like retailing use cases, which are like retailing or customer care versus like brand experience, which is like the Jimmy Turtles bot.
You go first.
I would just say dramatically more of all of those things. Probably.
I would say on our platform, so you had the brands and you had the retail. What was the first one? Native services. I would say brands would be 60%, retail 20, and the rest 20.
I think I see bots not sort of as a special use case that applies to some verticals, but I see them as just the latest reincarnation of a website or an app, right? So if you ask the same questions about websites, right? What's the distribution between brands and use cases and verticals? I mean, I don't know the answer, but it's just a lot of each of those. And frankly, to me, what's driving the bot phenomena is the fact that you have a ton of eyeballs, right? 3 to 4 billion mobile users worldwide opening the messaging app dozens of times a day. So every website, every app will have to repurpose, reinvent, reformat itself for the bot ecosystem. And you're just going to have, millions of bots because it just makes sense. It's a convenient format. Now, of course, there'll be a lot of unique and new innovations that we haven't yet anticipated or can even think of, right? But I would resist this thing about, okay, here are these 12 use cases that are good for bots while others are for other things. I think you're just going to, it tips over, right? For the first 100 or the first 1,000 use cases, once they're covered by bots, suddenly consumers are there and they expect to be there and they expect every other brand to be there too, and then everyone has to be there, right? And it's so reminiscent of what happened in the mid-90s with websites, where we said, okay, we'll keep Office and PowerPoint and so on the desktop, but we'll move some of the thing. What is a website good for? Well, maybe marketing or broadcasting or something. And then it just became everything, right? And except barring a few exceptions, it just transforms everything. And my gut is it's going to be the same with bots, yeah.
Yeah, I asked the question because I think there's a life cycle to it. And even when web came out, there were certain verticals that were early adopters.
Right.
And so I only asked the question sort of informed, from the tools that are being built, are you the creators of the use cases that are coming first to provide that?
All right, just quick. I think if I were to hazard a quick guess, I think it'll be the long tail use cases that'll jump onto it faster. Because if you think about Uber, it's already a top 10 app or something, right? And for them, bots is just an extra channel. But there are so many other apps that it's really hard to get downloaded, but bots provides a huge venue. So they're going to jump onto it with both feet and so on. So anyway.
Slightly alternate view. Bots aren't really new. They're kind of old. They've been around for a while. And for the most part, they've been kind of arty. It's a different scene. It reminds me of the early web. There's a lot of sort of freaky art show experimental bots on places like Twitter and IRC. So games could end up being a huge venue for the early world of bots. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about.
All right. Thank you all. Thank everybody. Huh? Oh, no. Sorry. If you have more questions, find us.
Okay, I think, where is Amir? There you are. Stuart's coming at 11, right? Yeah. All right, so we'll have like a little short break.
Yeah, one more.
Oh.
One more. So, sorry, this is like a last-minute addition. Robert, come on up. So, a lot of people have been talking about like, oh, we're going to find a killer bot. We're going to find a killer bot. Like, what's going to be the killer bot? Nobody has more than 10,000 teams or whatever on their bots. In 2001, Robert and his peers had a bot on AOL Instant Messenger called SmarterChild, and it had 30 million people use it. And they built brand bots for Radiohead and a bunch of other brands that did things like the Radiohead bot did, I think, 90 million messages during the 6-month campaign on AOL Instant Messenger in 2001. So I'm really excited to have him here to just give a quick address. I won't play this video because it's filled with cuss words, but you should go and Google their launch video. Yeah, well, you can cuss, but Peter is a very foul-mouthed person in this video, but it's amazing to watch, and it's like an incredible historical document for this world that we are now again in, that I would highly encourage you to look at. So SmarterChild launch video on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know it's there. Thanks. I'm turning off Wi-Fi. Give me a sec to just.
I should have just played the video. No.
Okay. Okay. Hi. Hi. I'm Robert Hoffer. By way of introduction, I've been doing stuff in the computer industry for many, many, many years. I used to be the youngest person in the room. Now I'm one of the oldest. When I say that, my first product was a long time ago, a thing called Sargon, which was the first microcomputer chess program in 1981. So I dropped out of Columbia, much to my parents' chagrin, so that I could take a job at a company called Hayden Publishing, so that I could test video games, which we loaded on, I think the biggest computer we had was an Apple II at the time. That year we won the Microcomputer International Chess Tournament, and we outsold a product called VisiCalc, which meant we sold 100,000 units. And my dad had started a computer store, which was the first Apple dealership in New Jersey, so I grew up in an Apple dealership. So I was at the Mac launch, and my Macintosh is signed by Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs and a whole bunch of other people, and I keep it in my garage. And it's cool. I have a whole career museum in my garage. And so here we are in 2015, and the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, which I just saw a couple of weeks ago, is still the most boring movie in the entire world. It goes on forever and forever and forever, and the only cool thing about it is the artificially intelligent robot who goes rogue, Hal. I'm sorry, Dave. And in 2001, we launched a product called SmarterChild. SmarterChild was sort of a bot odyssey for us. We launched it onto America Online, the instant messaging thing of the day. At that time, I think at America Online, they had a huge user community, 100 million maybe, 150 million users. SmarterChild was a natural language bot, and I came up with the idea for a natural language bot while I was sitting in the movie Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams, and what I wanted, another boring 2.5-hour movie, like while Robin Williams doesn't age, we all did. And, but what it was like Robin Williams was a bot who, just like Pinocchio, wanted to be human. So what happened with SmarterChild was we designed all kinds of different applications, which we called knowledge domains. We built a complete development environment called BuddyScript, and we launched the bot within about 6 months. So we grew. We grew and we grew and we grew and we grew. Our guys went to Exodus at the time, which was a network operations center, and there was this little company called Google, and Google was having these servers, these 1U rack servers built. And we saw those, and my partner, Tim Kay, who's my brother-in-law, Caltech PhD, who won the Academy Award for Science and Technology, looked at their servers and said, hey, those are cool, can we have some of those? And so in order to support 30 million users, we were the second largest site in Exodus after Google. So we were using their stuff and just trying to grow to support the traffic. And we'd have to order servers like 2 weeks in advance because they had to build them and rack them up, and that problem's gone away. We were, I don't know, at least 5% of all of the instant messaging traffic in the world was then a bot. And this was when AOL didn't want our bot online. And the reason was we were breaking AOL. It was a problem with presence detection that they couldn't solve, right? And presence detection is like a urinal. When you stand there, it knows you're there. When you leave, it flushes. So with us, it was like the bot knew when you were there. And then when you were there, we would talk to you. And there was no download, so you added it to the buddy list. There was nothing as an impediment to stopping this from happening. And so we found a distribution mechanism that at the time was very difficult because everybody was worried because the download was fat. And it was hard to get things downloaded. So we already had a download. We had AOL AIM and ICQ and MSN Messenger. And so AOL would periodically rate limit us and stop us from going on the network. And we had a kid, his name is Adam Fritzler, that was literally a kid. He was 17 years old that we found online, and he had broken the protocols online and open sourced him. It pissed off AOL tremendously. We hired him, and his job was to sit there, and every time they would change the rate limiting schema at AOL, he would break it, and then we would go back online. We hacked AOL in order to get there. And then the guys from Radiohead saw what we were doing and called us up on the phone and said, hey, we want to launch a Radiohead bot. And it turned out that Raul Mujica, who was running AOL Instant Messenger at the time, a really good guy, loved Radiohead. So we said, hey, we'll do the Radiohead bot if you let this little thing we have called SmarterChild on the network. And he said, okay. So we did that. Oh, just in terms of traffic, we were doing billions of messages, and it was all teens then, it's all teens now. We knew that because we had the statistics. We should tell you, we had the statistics and we watched it from every single of the major platforms, and what would happen is we would have spikes of traffic when people would come home at 3 o'clock on the East Coast from school. The traffic would spike. When they dialed in, the traffic dialed up, you know, dialed up. And then the traffic would spike again 3 hours later. Why? Because the kids were coming home on the other coast. And then it would spike again at like midnight, and what we figured out was happening was that all their other friends were going to sleep, and the only person left to talk with was SmarterChild. And what they did mainly was not what we thought. Okay, but let's talk a little bit more about SmarterChild. So here's what happened. Microsoft did due diligence on us. They sent a team of really talented guys. Steve Liffick and a whole bunch of really smart people from Microsoft showed up. They beat the heck out of Pierre Berkaloff and our engineering team. Our engineering team was up to the task. And ultimately, after a whole bunch of years of trying to build something other than SmarterChild, which were instant messaging bots for customer service, for Time Warner and Major League Baseball and every client you could ever possibly imagine. We built hundreds and hundreds of these things. Microsoft decided, hey, customer service might be a really good thing to use this for because it'll reduce our cost of customer service as an actual return on investment. And we grew the thing after, I don't know, $20 million of investment from Reuters Corporation, and you know, we were the darlings of the internet. I went to the White House Correspondents' Dinner as the guest of Reuters. I sat next to Jerry Yang. It was George W. Bush was the guy that was in office then. It's a very weird time for me. So they paid some money for this guy. I think they didn't really pay money for SmarterChild because here's what happened. By 2007, Microsoft realizing that SmarterChild might be a little bit of a problem because he was snarky. If you've ever talked to him, you'll know that, and I can prove it in a second. SmarterChild is an editorial problem. Bots are not a technical problem. Bots are an editorial problem because bots have a personality. When you're talking about something which doesn't have a personality, which runs around behind the scenes and does stuff for you, that's not a bot. That's an agent. Agents don't need personalities. I offer you the Matrix. No personality there. Bots need personalities. That was the key to the success of SmarterChild. He had a personality. In fact, a friend of mine who was a lead character animator by the name of Doug Frankel, who is still a lead character animator, one of the top lead character animators at Pixar, was also an investor in our company. And when he came and talked to SmarterChild, the first thing that he said is, he said to me, Hofsky, we'd known each other for a very long time, your bot is more popular than The Simpsons in terms of audience share. We were bigger than the biggest television show in the history of television. And he said, and the reason was because your bot's got an attitude problem. We were all from New York and New Jersey. Bot's got an attitude problem. So they lobotomized SmarterChild. In 2009, SmarterChild was murdered. They removed him from the network. They killed my baby. We were all very saddened by this because bot lives matter. When SmarterChild was pulled from the network, I went back to talk with Microsoft. And Microsoft had a tendency to buy things back in the day, and in a moment of austerity, what happened was Ray Ozzie and Bill Gates sat down with the team that was leading bot development, and they had just purchased a company called TellMe. You may know TellMe as an integrated voice response system, which was really a question and answer, menu-driven type of product. They spent $800 million on the acquisition, and when they sat down and looked at the technology at Microsoft Research, Ray Ozzie and Bill Gates looked at our technology, which was basically scripted. Okay? It was one way to skin the boat at the time. No machine learning, a limited amount of that. We had translated into 8 languages at Microsoft. The mission was to translate into 38 languages. We had only gotten to 8, including Simple Mandarin. We thought that was pretty good. Nobody else even had 1, so 8 we thought was all right. So Bill Gates said to Ray Ozzie, hey, don't we already have something like this? And Ray Ozzie said, no, we have 6 of these. And so they killed it. Rest in peace. I bought back the technology from Microsoft on a license agreement in 2009, and I did a road show on Sand Hill Road, and I called every venture capitalist I know, and I know every venture capitalist. and they're all nice guys. And I went with the original engineer, Pierre Berkoloff, and my co-founder, Peter Levitin, and we explained to them that cell phones are coming. Cell phones are coming, and they're going to have these things. When Sean Carolyn, who was an investor in Siri, one of the early investors, what he said was, when we first came up with the idea of Siri, SmarterChild already had 15 million users and was growing by 20% a week. The market was talking, so they knew. In fact, Siri was the first purchase of an app that Apple ever made. They had lots of apps. In fact, at the WWDC yesterday, they talked about it. Tim said they have 2 million apps. That's a lot of apps. That's more apps than we need. That's more apps than I can fit on my phone. I can only use about one at a time. I use like maybe 6 apps. I'm not sure that the paradigm of bots being apps or bots being web pages is an accurate paradigm, because that's too domain specific for a conversational bot. See, a bot can do lots of things, and an app properly done only does one thing very well. So there's a big difference between a conversational bot and an app or a website. So I like to think, and I don't know if this is true, that we were one of the first memes. What was the meme? The meme was what we called the Captain Kirk problem, which is trying to convince SmarterChild to have sex with you. And that was 60% of all of our traffic. And remember the amount of traffic we had. This was a lot of traffic. And so we had a guy who would sit there all day long, and he would watch people cursing at the bot and come up with a curse word filter, which, by the way, we sold to Microsoft alongside. Now that guy, his name is Chris Bray. I don't know if anyone has heard of Chris Bray. He runs a little website now called Apple.com. When the venture capitalists took over SmarterChild, they fired Chris almost immediately, because what did he do? Sat around and developed methods of keeping people from convincing the bot to have sex with them. Microsoft had the technology to prevent the Tay problem from happening, where if your bot talks back, your end users will have a lot of fun hacking the bot. I promise. They will try. They will also succeed. Just like Captain Kirk was able to defeat Landru on the computer planet, they will get him in a logical loop. And we had a problem with a Santa bot, because, you know, if you said to the Santa bot, you know, I want to sit on your lap, it got a little hinky. That was a problem. You have to be careful of those kinds of things. So fast forward, welcome, 5 minutes. Welcome, Smarter Children. You're all children of SmarterChild. We weren't even the first bot, right? The first concepts of these things goes Alan Turing back, right? It's way, way back. Natural language processing is one of those things like, you know, flying cars. We know there's going to be a flying car, and until Elon builds it, we won't have it, right? So when I was a kid, really young, I saw a guy by the name of Alan Kay, who's an Apple fellow, and he played the piano during his speech, and what he talked about was creating the future by inventing it. And that's what you guys are doing, right? It took 15 years for this to swing around and become a fad again. I mean, is there a bot phenomenon? I'm looking around the room, I'm thinking, yeah, there is. We tried to do this. We launched a platform, we got some users, now there are 10,000 people building bots. When your platform does something that you don't expect to do, it's mature. That's what Steve Liffick at Microsoft said when he saw our product. So, why are your bots different than all other bots? Don't guess my religion. Like, there are 4 kinds of bots, right? The dull, the foolish, the heedless, and the wise. And what I want to counsel you guys to do is don't build dull bots. And by dull bots, I mean like Dory the fish. Dory the fish doesn't remember what she had for lunch this morning. If you ask Alexa, which is a cool bot, we'll talk about Alexa in a second. If you ask Alexa, I'm interested in the weather in Miami, it'll tell you the weather in Miami. If you say, can you book me some flights there, it doesn't know the anaphora of what does there mean. And SmarterChild did. We had phatic expression, we had anaphora, we had all the natural language processing stuff that you need to maintain a full conversation, and we were keeping profiles on every single user in depth. You see, intimacy is a matter of shared remembrance and experience. And if your bot doesn't remember day to day or month to month what your customer was saying, then your bot's an idiot. It's a Dory bot. Don't build Dory bots. build wise bots. Okay. If you ain't got that do-re-mi. Our problem was we never really even wanted a business model. The venture capitalist behind the company was a guy by the name of Andy Weissman. Andy Weissman's at Union Square Venture Partners in New York. He's a dear friend of mine. Our plan was never to write a business plan and to sell this thing to AOL for hundreds of millions of dollars before anybody realized what had happened. That didn't happen. So we were forced to look at business models. What are the business models? The business models are transactions, advertising, subscriptions, and development. Most of you, I think, are on the D side, developing bots for a living for somebody else. There probably are spots for each of these types of models, but I think there's another way to go. Alexa has sold over 4 million units to date. Closing in on 5, $200 each, it's $1 billion. It's by far the highest revenue generator. They've taken a firm lead. I was at the WWDC listening to what was said. What they said was something sad. What they said was, Siri is now going to be opened up. Apple has chosen now to be number 2. We're opening up. Why? Because who else opened up? Alexa is open, so you can go and you can program Alexa. You can do your home entertainment system with Alexa. You can control your Philips Hue lighting. But the problem now is this. Your business, our business, the business we're all in is like Frogger, okay? If you're hopping across the street in Frogger, you're going to get hit by one side or another. And so there's a platform problem. No slide presentation would be complete without the compulsory slide of logos. My compulsory slide of logos, I'm sure you all know which ones they are the platform choices that you guys have to make. I wish I could inform you which was the better choice. I can't. I can tell you something about distribution, though, and that's how I'd like to close today. Dependent is unsustainable. That's what we found. We were dependent on Microsoft, on AOL, and on Yahoo to have our product up. You guys will likewise be dependent upon Microsoft and Facebook and Google. You must find an independent path and you must find independent distribution paths. There are several distribution models, and I'll close with this. So the distribution models, I call them Star Trek. Go where no one has gone before, and the world will follow you there, potentially do something new. New is important. Don't just do what everybody else is doing. Field of Dreams, this really actually works in our business. If you build it, they will come. That's what happened with SmarterChild. In fact, we used all of these. The other distribution model is the Manchurian Candidate. You're building sleeper agents. When you launch and you have traffic, we got traffic through sex chat. We were then able to use it to generate millions of dollars of advertising revenue. It wasn't our plan, but guess what? Once you're talking with somebody and in conversation with them, you might be able to do something else, Manchurian Candidate. And then finally, the craze, A Hard Day's Night. What happened with SmarterChild was word of mouth distribution picked up, and we became a virus. And so the reason for our growth of traffic is these 4 distribution models. And so I urge you to consider, don't be dependent upon one platform, and consider your distribution models. Look for ways to make money. And I should say, in Silicon Valley, I've been doing this a very long time. For all of you who know, winter is coming. So do it quickly, do it now, and thank you for your time. Do you guys want to ask me anything?
So we were going to talk for a few minutes about kind of what we do at Betaworks, but from a data perspective for bots that people are building. So for those of you who don't know us, we do 2 things at Betaworks. We build companies, and independently but highly related, we make seed stage investments. And so one of those things in the category of investing is we're doing this thing, BotCamp, which we mentioned. So what I wanted to do was share some data from what we're seeing in terms of, there was a question earlier about what's being built, categories specifically, without sort of going deep into specific companies, talking about some data from the bot perspective, and then also we built a bot, and so I wanted to share some data with how people were interacting with it.
Yeah, so we'll keep it short, but Matt and I are the co-creators of something called BotCamp, which is a program that we're doing at Betaworks. It's a program we're going to take in 10 chatbot startups, do sort of like a pre-seed accelerator program with them. And the sort of inspiration for this is that since I joined Betaworks, about a year ago, Matt and I have had a conversation about bots, I think, like a 2-hour conversation about bots like every day since I started. And then about 3 months ago, we just came up with the idea for BotCam, thinking about how excited we were about the space. We had already obviously made an investment in Howdy with Ben almost a year ago, actually now, and wanted to learn a lot more about the space and frankly make a bet on chatbots being a big thing and trying to figure out what the opportunities there were. So we opened it up. We got 346 startups applied, all bots, and we're going to pick 10 of those for the program. And the program will be 12 weeks of product development, branding, user acquisition, data science, fundraising, all sort of typical stuff you see in Accelerator, but all focused around bots and conversational interfaces. And we have an awesome set of partners, which you can see on this obligatory logo slide. And now we can jump in sort of to the data, which I think is the most interesting part for everyone here. And Matt, do you want to dig in on this?
So this is kind of hard to see from up there, but I think we're going to share this more publicly. So the most 15% of the applications were enterprise, and I don't think it's a surprise. Slack is a big platform for distribution, and so I think that's the use case on enterprise. We have creation tools and platforms as the second biggest category, 9%. The third biggest category is assistant/concierge, 8%, healthcare and wellness, 7%, commerce, 6%, finance, 6%, news and media, and then we have kind of entertainment, travel, education. To me, the interesting thing here is that if you take out assistants, /concierge is 8%, and if you look at travel, which is 5%, and maybe one other category, those are the only human-assisted categories. Everything else is what we think about as like actual bots, things that aren't just sending you to someone and then routing it to a human and then routing back and responding. Some things are probably hybrids, but I think it was interesting that there was real kind of technology there.
Yeah, and then we managed to tally together the different platforms that everyone was building for. You'll notice that these add up to more than 100% because a lot of the bots built for multiple platforms, which is not surprising. But what might have been noteworthy is that SMS is still the most popular platform for people to build for. Obviously, I think 100% of those are using Twilio, as far as we could tell. I think the weighting of enterprise-focused bots meant that a lot of the bots that we saw were building for Slack, and I think showed a lot of the maturity of the ecosystem there.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, we can, and again, we'll circulate these. And if you have questions specifically, we can hit them. Should we? I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, some people built their own app.
Yeah. So this sort of, depending on how you think about it, so this is like they actually built an app, but they had then the notion of bots inside of it, and then you have sort of at the far end we had a few on Alexa, fewer than actually I thought would apply. We had some that were online, and then Kik. And Twitter. So should we go to the next one?
Yeah.
So the next thing we want to talk about was we'd built this kind of fun bot called Botwick. The CEO of Betaworks is John Borthwick, so he's British, so everything's a pun. And so Botwick is a pun. So you can text this number to see it, and I've included the number on the subsequent slides so that I can kind of keep going. But some data that we got from this is that people said hello 19 different ways. Hello Botwick, hello Mr. Bot, hello world, hello, oh hello, what is hello? So all these different kinds.
Only Lily said hi Botwick, Lily.
So yo Botwick, why you no home is my favorite. So the intro message we found was actually pretty important when you think about not being able to communicate what the drop-down menus are, like what the thing can do. The intro message becomes really important. So just so that you can see it, it says, how are you today? What would you like to discuss? You can ask me the weather, just say weather plus zip, or the news, or ask me what podcast the boss is listening to. I get to hear them too, or about a joke. How about a joke? I highlighted in bold the things that were sort of keywords for categories. And so what we have on the back end, we use Dexter to do regex expressions. And just so you have a sense, this is a relatively dumb bot. It is literally an Excel spreadsheet where on column A, it's a regex match, and in column B is the response to that question. just to give you kind of a sense of the simplicity of this. So so we had 1,900 messages to give you a sense of the denominator, 206 weather, news, podcasts, and then we had people asking questions that aren't necessarily directly here. So how old are you? How are you? What are you reading? Was reading, time, what time is it? And then people asked for a joke. The most popular ones were weather and joke, which were the anticipated ones. One of the things that came up yesterday, so I kind of ran a bunch of data last night because I thought it was interesting to hear. These are, I guess, a little bit cut off, but I'll read them out. People were talking about the length of search queries, and so I went back into the Botwick logs and just looked at what the lengths were and how people were interacting with this thing, which people kind of fundamentally know is actually about keywords. Even though they're asking these questions, we're basically doing these regex matches to figure out which keywords. So on average, the length of a request was 13 characters. The shortest was 2. The longest was 50. Now, keep in mind this is mostly done it was all done through text message, so that probably influences the way that people are asking the questions or the length of the questions. But what was interesting was, looking at one example of the weather category, people would ask, what's the weather in a particular zip code? Tell me the weather in a zip code. Weather, zip code, weather. And so people were kind of, you can see this in a bunch of different categories. People were trying to figure out what the keyword was and just going directly to it. We could also, this sort of looks at another piece of it, 514 questions didn't have answers. You can start to see people trying to poke around to see whether there's keywords or Easter eggs in this. So we have various emoji, lots of profanity. People ask questions like Alan Turing, are you happy, are you my friend? And then people would say like Bernie Sanders, drums, E equals MC squared, happy birthday. I think somewhere in there is like Trump. And I think that was good. I wanted to just go through that really quickly, but if you guys any of you have specific questions around any of this data, we're happy to answer them.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Just take the top two or top 3 applicants that you accepted, and then say sort of what you thought about them, why you're excited.
So we haven't actually finished that process. So we're right in the very end of the process. So we're getting to. I'll tell you sort of a broad view that we have taken from on the investment perspective, and tell me if you have something to add here, Peter. Is that we were looking for bots where there was some level of depth somewhere. So meaning that like I was using kind of internally Uber as an example. Like that's a bot, but it has like the most depth. There are cars driving around and like supporting that bot, right? And so whether that's sort of deep data science or a bunch of data that they're gathering, or AI, or some kind of network that's being built, that was sort of a bunch of how we were thinking about competitive moats.
I mean, I think the other thing is, since it's a pre-seed program, it's also meant for people very, very early, and most stuff was pre-product or pre-launch, not pre-product, but not everything was, and we were, there was a pretty wide breadth of where people were in the product process that applied, and we didn't want it just to be stuff that was. We could have just picked stuff that was out in market and had users, and we deliberately didn't want to do that in the stuff we selected.
Another question?
Yeah, so out of all those like 350 ideas and submissions, were there any that sort of surprised you? You've been talking to us for 2 hours a day for all these months. Were there anything in there that you thought, wow, that's amazing, we just haven't thought of?
Oh, there's
a lot going on.
Well, we saw a lot of the same ideas over and over again, not surprisingly. I think that some of the things that surprised us were around, I would say that Betaworks historically has been maybe more consumer-focused in the way that we've approached everything, but that a lot of the most fully formed products were around enterprise, and I think part of that was that the use cases around bots and when they make sense are most fully realized in the enterprise space, specifically really around Slack and people being able to integrate there and be able to have a bot which is able to integrate into their workflow or into some aspect of the business. And so I think we're a little surprised by, maybe surprised ourselves at how much we came around to seeing the utility of bots in the enterprise space, rather than, I think our original intention is that we were going to have a lot more consumer. Well, we had people from all over the world. That was something that was really encouraging. I mean, people from West Africa, people from South Asia, Southeast Asia, China, South America, a lot from the U.S. And so there was, I think, what surprised us, maybe not surprised us, but I think what was interesting was seeing that there are people building bots all over the world, and that it's not something that's localized to the Bay Area or just people who are, sort of within this network. That it's people all over the world see it as an opportunity to build and innovate and make cool stuff. And so I think that because it was an open filter, we were able to get people that wouldn't necessarily be part of the traditional fundraising process that that startups go through. So that was pretty awesome. Yeah.
Other questions?
I think everyone wants lunch. I know I do. One more question. Okay.
What is your Botness data telling you about the usefulness of guiding users with keywords? Like, I assume those keywords were bold. Maybe they weren't, but we've seen all kinds of keywords. Hi, I'm the bot. This is what I can do. And then everybody says, but I want Bernie Sanders and Trump and Trump. What is that finite data set say to you about invalid votes?
I mean, I think that so we didn't bold anything. There's a bot called Purple, which maybe you're referring to, which has all caps, which I think is they'll make a sentence, and then anything in all caps, you can respond with just that. I think it's actually a really good UI and a good user experience to just subtly say, if you want to respond to this, you can, and there will be more behind there. I've seen ones that say text M for more, so they'll send you one message and then kind of wait to pull. I don't know that we have answers yet. I think it sort of raised more questions about how you indicate what these things are supposed to do. One of the things that we've learned from, I think, making the BotCamp bot, from BotWick, from seeing data inside of products like Poncho, is that all of us need to be thoughtful about whether, like, where our lane is. Like, are we staying in our lane, or are we, like, how do we react to things that are outside of this core kind of vertical scope? A lot of the conversations yesterday in the AI and machine learning group were about the opportunities to go deep in verticals, but that sort of necessarily means you're not going to be able to answer every question. And I think that having a personality to be able to respond to things that are outside can be helpful for the BotWick bot. John, I think, has like a random magic 8-ball answer that comes through. For the BotCamp bot, we just said, this is a dumb bot, and so we want you to help us make it smarter. Any other questions? Thank you so much.